Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast by closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Karen Vadney, and in each episode, we'll uncover the stories behind successful startups, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future expansion. Today, we're excited to have Nicole Craveiro, the founder of Crave HRO. Nicole is an award-winning HR consultant who's shaking up the HR space with her people-first approach, helping small businesses create workplaces where employees thrive. Nicole will be sharing her founding story and giving us a glimpse into her plans for Crave HRO's future growth. So let's jump right in, Nicole. Welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. We are super excited to have you on. And so Nicole, can you just take us back to the beginning? I like for our listeners to know where you started, where you come from, what specific workplace challenge or maybe gap inspired you to start Crave HRO.
Sure. I started Crave HRO in July of 2021. I had just left a fairly new internal HR manager position at a software company. I had been hired with the impression that I was going to come in, make positive changes, shape the culture, but I pretty quickly figured out that was not the case. They really didn't have any interest in their employees' well-being. They didn't have any interest in taking the guidance that I was willing to give them. And I really did try to give it a shot for the sake of the employees that were there. But after 2 months, I actually ended up walking out in the middle of the day because there was a situation that put the employee's safety at risk. I then found out a year or so later that they were positioning themselves to sell the company. So that's why they had hired me in the first place, because having a degreed and certified HR person on staff made their company more valuable. However, when I left, I didn't have another job lined up. And I had come from a PEO background where I was an HR business partner. I was working with 70 different companies. I was responsible for 2,000 employees. And that was something I really enjoyed. So I started up Crave HRO and built it from there, followed that model.
Amazing. Okay, so it sounds like you started there, you had this experience, you were like, these things aren't working out here, and you brought that to where you could build your own thing so that you could do right, especially within the HR space.
Yeah. And the first year that I was in business, I ended up getting another internal HR management job. So just down the road from my house. So the first year I was in business, I was doing both. They were aware of that and they were fine with it, or so I thought. But it gave me some time to build the brand while still being able to pay my bills with a secure, steady income and gather a few small clients. So then when I did transition into my business full time, that I had a solid base to grow from.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Let's
Yeah.
dive into the nuts and bolts for our listeners here. Can you walk us through how Crave HRO generates revenue today? Like for our listeners, especially any potential clients of yours, what is the core of your service offerings, like compliance support or Crave Wave, and how do you structure out that pricing?
Okay, so in the beginning, it took a lot of trial and error. In the beginning, you just want business, right? You want people to want you. So I would do whatever for whoever for whatever. I have since come to learn that those types of that approach didn't really work. It was leading to the same issues that I was having when I was a in-house HR employee. Now I have my packages structured into different tiers, and they're based on types of tasks that client needs. So a client with maybe a handful of employees might not need as much high touch support as someone with say 50 employees. So there are different tiers to like address those needs. I also recently Crave Wave you mentioned is a standalone solution for HR compliance tools that I trust. I started using it with my clients and then I made it available to my clients as a value add. And then I made it available to the general public for a subscription on a subscription basis. So that tool has access to attorney vetted templates. It has a handbook builder for multi states. It has a learning management system where you can type in your state and you can get all the mandatory compliance trainings that you need. And it also does have an HR hotline. They wouldn't get me per se, but they would get access to a certified HR professional.
Okay,
Yeah.
amazing. There's a few different services there that we're doing.
Yeah. And I've
And
also just launched some digital projects as well. I've
okay.
released two children's books about HR because when I started actually, I didn't know what HR was until I graduated my first, actually, maybe even with my second degree in college. So just to educate, like in the media, HR is always seen as like this terrible person that ruins people's lives and trying to like educate people at a younger age. That's actually not always the case.
Right. There's a lot of times when you need HR. From my own personal experience, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners, there's been times where I've worked places and there's no HR, and I'm like, it would be
Mhm.
nice to have one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
where I come in because I'm not on site full time. I'm not fully embedded into my client's company. I'm there when they need it.
right, which is necessary. And
Mhm.
on that front, how are you currently acquiring clients for Crave HRO? Which channels, LinkedIn or your involvements in certain groups, have been most effective for you?
So I do a ton of networking. I'm a part of several different local groups. Each one serves a different purpose, I would say. So I'm a co-chair for the HIA, and that's the Human Resources Committee. And that is more of a knowledge sharing type of situation where it's like HR for HR. Like we're going to be there to support each other. And if we're stuck on something, we could pass it back and forth. And then also we do educational seminars. And then I'm also a member of BNI, and that is more like referral based and transactional. Whereas I'm also a member of this group called Huga, where it's all about building relationships and then the business comes naturally. I'm on Upwork. I do have a social media presence. So those ones, it's more of a passive type of thing. But I would say that I have gotten the most effective one is through networking, word of mouth. But I have picked up a few clients that found me on Google or LinkedIn or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like mainly using referrals and networking and then trying out a couple different avenues. And so I talk with entrepreneurs just like yourself every day, and so many of them do referrals and networking and word of mouth. And what they typically find is that it can be unpredictable. And Nicole, I'm curious, what has your experience been with that, and where do you see yourself moving in order to generate leads for the business?
So I was lucky. I had been in the local business community for a few years before I started my own business. So I already had a pretty solid network in place, super supportive. When I had went out on my own fully, I reached out to one of my groups and I said, "Hey, at that time, unfortunately, my mother was in the hospital and I was like, hey, I need help. So if you can help me get the word out, I would really appreciate that." And I was actually able to triple my business in the first 3 months. And then I surpassed my corporate salary in the first year. And I've been having steady year over year growth. And yes, some of my clients do drop off, whether that's they're bringing in their HR in house, or we weren't exactly the right fit, our values weren't aligned, something along those lines. But for the most part, that's why I do the retainer based approach. That way, we're both invested. I'm invested in you, you're invested in me, and I look to build long term partnerships with them.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, I love that. Nicole, let's go into the client journey. So let's say I'm coming in. I need your help with HR. What does that look like when engaging small business owners from initial outreach to signing them up for your HR services?
So it's really different for everyone. No two employer are the same. Everyone has to be compliant. That is the baseline. So that is my baseline service where I'm going to make sure that you have a handbook. If you already have a handbook, I'm going to make sure it's up to date. And I'm going to make sure that you have access to that software that, you'll have access to the most up-to-date labor law alerts and the most up-to-date labor law posters for you to post on site or digitally or however your state requires. But it goes up from there. So that's my advisory level package. There's then an administrative level package where I'm more hands-on instead of me advising and you doing, and now I'm doing it for them, but it's still employer only at that point in time. The next package is my people package, which is people facing. So that's when I get involved with the employees and I become a resource for them too. When that's onboarding, offboarding, helping them with benefits. If there's performance management that's needed, I help with that too. And then my final one is HR presence package, which basically I'm coming out from under my brand, going or and then going under their brands, I'll monitor dedicated email address. I'll be more involved in their day-to-day staff meetings, leadership meetings, whole 9 yards. So it depends on which one of those services they are utilizing for what the onboarding process is going to look like. The more in depth and involved they want me to be, the more high touch the onboarding process is going to be.
Okay. Okay. That
That
makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah, it does. And in terms of how your team is structured today, is it just yourself doing all of this? Do you have a team behind you? Tell our listeners a little bit about that.
So I have a VA that I utilize for my administrative stuff on the back end, but it is just me right now. I have in the past utilized other HR contractors to help me out. I say we also just got certified or licensed to broker benefits. So that's branch I'm building right now.
Amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
so it sounds like you do still have some time and availability to put your energy elsewhere. You're not just slammed with all of this stuff right
Yeah, I would say even though I'm working with 15 to 20 employers at any given time, that I'm probably at half capacity. Half my time spent with my clients, and the other half is on business development and networking.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel like that is something you expect to be able to sustain over the coming months, or will you likely need to hire some support in this area?
The coming months, yes. In the coming years, only time will tell, but I anticipate that I'll need a team at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Nicole, I'm curious, I know our listeners probably are as well, but if you could solve one thing today that would unlock growth for you and your business, what would it be?
So, unfortunately, my family has been going through a little bit of a personal hardship this year. My husband got hurt at work actually a year ago to today.
Oh,
He was with his employer for 18 years. He had gotten hurt. He's a butcher. And he filed a workers' comp claim and they controverted the claim, didn't agree that it happened at work. He actually won his claim after a very long process, but then the company appealed it without introducing any new evidence. And now in the state of New York, at least, there is no time frame for when that gets resolved. So it's got to go into a review to make sure the judge made the right decision. And it could be anywhere from 9 to 12 months. So right now I am the sole provider of my household. So that has been a challenge. It's been preventing me from being able to invest back into my business. Whereas I used to be like, he took care of the household bills and I took care of the business and the extras. But now
mhm.
it's not so much like that anymore. So I would say
Okay.
funding at this moment is a hurdle. I have faith that everything will work out and we'll overcome it just like we always do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
On the other note, let's talk about like growth and vision. So, how do you see yourself growing in the next like 6 to 12 months in order to sustain this position as I don't want to call you the breadwinner, but I guess like you're going out there and you're
Yeah.
making it
Yeah.
happen.
That's one.
Tell me some top priorities for you and how you're gonna get through this.
So the obvious one is client growth. I've had a steady influx of clients over the last couple of months. I'm also looking for sources of passive income. So I mentioned the ebooks. I've also created a digital course that I'm launching soon on how to hire compliantly in any state. Things that I could pass on my knowledge. I'm even doing like a handbook for people who want to go off on their own. So it's called So You Want to Be an HR Consultant, and
Nice.
kind of outlines my journey and the steps that it took to get here. So just looking for other income opportunities, partnerships, things of that nature to build more revenue streams while my husband recovers because he hasn't been able to get medical treatment either. Yeah.
Nice.
So
Oh,
it's going to be a while.
I'm sorry to hear that. It
Yeah,
sounds like
thanks.
you have some goals in place in order
Yeah.
to keep
Yeah.
going and make it happen. So let's jump into a little bit of a lightning round before we finish up. Nicole, what is one tool or resource that has been absolutely game changing for Crave HRO?
I talked about it a little bit before, but it's definitely Crave. I used to do all the labor law updates manually, and I used to provide all the templates manually and have to make all the changes manually. And now all of that is housed in one software, and it's been a huge time saver for me and my clients.
Yeah, amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
Crave Wave. Oh, amazing. Okay. And then what is the best piece of advice that you've received about scaling a small business, especially in the HR consulting space?
So this wasn't necessarily business related, but it's the first thing that came to my mind. An old friend once told me, "Don't stop what you're doing. You haven't made the wrong move yet." And that pretty much stuck with me to quell any feelings of self-doubt and just trust in myself and know that I'm going to have my own back.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. That's amazing. One
Um,
more question for you, and this is really for our listeners. What advice would you give to founders just starting their journey in building a client-focused business like yours, Crave HRO?
so I think this is like a twofold answer. One is make sure you build your network and invest in that because when you're off on your own, you don't have a support system and they become your support system. They become the colleagues you used to have. And then also to make time to care for yourself because if you're pouring from an empty cup, business ownership won't be as fulfilling as it should be because you're running on empty.
Mhm. Amazing. Thank you so much, Nicole. That was beautiful. And
Thanks.
just wrap up another inspiring episode of Founders Future. Again, I want to thank Nicole for sharing her incredible journey and insights with us today. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their sales and marketing efforts through world-class systems and playbooks. Until then, keep climbing, and we will see you on the next one.